welcome to our first Leaders and Managers of 2022. We are absolutely delighted to be welcoming members of Michelle Wisby's team to share their thoughts and their experiences and their preparations for the new EYFS. I think it is really important to share that whilst there are several nurseries that will share their ideas with us, they are drawn together by one significant leadership of Michelle, and that leadership allows them to be individual within a context of a whole. And that is a very, very important aspect of the practice at Michelle's nurseries. And we have had to ask Michelle to present this and her team to present our session today, simply because neither Wendelin or I are in a setting anymore. So we have to draw on the expertise of the community. We hope you will find it helpful. We hope you will find it useful, and that it will stimulate your thoughts about your own practice. I think that is really, really important. So we welcome our team. We welcome Joe Gaunt from Westwood, together with, I have lost your colleague with double-barreled name. She's no longer on my screen, Claire Snell-Smith. We also welcome Rachel Salt, Carly Gold, and one more person, don't we? Oh, Becky Sadler. They come from different settings that Michelle owns, and they will share the presentation that they have prepared with you. Wendelin will manage the PowerPoint for them, and we thank them for being willing to contribute and share their experiences, and we welcome them to Montessori Musings today. So it is over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Have you got the PowerPoint? There we go. So we're going to talk about the philosophy, curriculum and recording today. So in this evening's webinar, we're going to cover, we're going to talk a little bit about the new EYFS, the Montessori philosophy and curriculum, the 3 I's, reflection on practice, and the learning walk. We're going to talk about bringing about change. The new EYFS has given us, so next slide, thank you. The new EYFS has given us the opportunity to bring about some positive change in our practice. Next slide, please. It's given us a voice in the approach we can take the curriculums we use to support children's learning. So why did the EYFS change again? Well, it changed to improve the outcomes for children, to strengthen their language development, particularly for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. It reduces workload so that practitioners can spend more time with the children, supporting their learning, and it updates the elements of the EYFS documentation. Next slide, please. So what is meant in the EYFS when describing the curriculum? Well, these 2 statements alone give us the freedom to embrace with confidence the Montessori approach, and we're excited to have this opportunity to really celebrate our roots and develop our practice from Montessori foundations. What we have to do is know about the EYFS, know the difference between the statutory and non-statutory, and to be able to develop our knowledge and language to explain and talk about it. Next slide, please. So why two non-statutory documents? The two non-statutory documents that can be used to support your curriculum and approach in the classroom are development matters and birth to 5 matters. There's no right or wrong one to use, and actually you don't need to use either of them. Next slide, please. What changes are happening in our practice? In our own practice, we've had to implement, reflect and change. Implement, reflect and change. We have created a starting point from which to develop what we are going to do going forward. Although our practice has not changed in the classroom, our prepared environment indoors and outdoors remains the same, whether working with Montessori materials, gardening outside or attending the forest school. We are also aware, as we wean ourselves away from recording, or over recording I should say, it will take time to get back to where we need to be. Next slide, please. And over to Jo.
Okay, thank you, Becky. My name's Jo, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our philosophy and how we articulate the philosophy and the curriculum to parents, outside agencies, and our Montessori community as well, and obviously Ofsted. Next slide, please. When we work with our teams, we try and bring the EYFS together with Montessori in the language that we feel comfortable using. So we did some research, and these are some of the words that came from the EYFS and Montessori, and statements on which we have developed our vision and practice. And we use these to increase our staff's confidence so they can talk to inspectors, parents, local authorities or outside agencies. So we want the staff to be able to articulate that, you know, in our nursery, children are respected for their individuality and their unique skills are celebrated, that children have that intrinsic motivation to learn, the huge importance of the first 6 years of a child's life, and that as adults in the classroom, we are facilitators and observers of learning, and the children have the freedom to direct their own learning without interference or over interference from adults. Next slide, please, Gwendolyn. So we use the model of the dynamic triangle as that powerful image and starting point when we're considering our Montessori philosophy. Although it's the centre of our approach in practice, there are many other influences that bring a Montessori curriculum together. So the creation of the prepared environment, the preparation of the adult, and how both these elements support the child's learning are additionally underpinned by the knowledge and the training of the adult, the culture of the community, excuse me, and in our ability as a team to use reflective practice to bring about change and development. It's all these elements that come together to create a Montessori curriculum. Have the next slide, please. So a further aid to our staff is to consider what we've called the 3 pillars of our philosophy. So when we think about the dynamic triangle and the child, we want them to think about how we nurture and empower the child. That prepared environment that we provide is rich and varied. And we, as the practitioner, the Montessorian practitioner, that we are proactive and reflective to give the best possible service to that child. Next slide, please. So let's have a little look at how we explain our Montessori curriculum. Next slide, please. So we developed this little crib sheet to support our teams, to help them with the words they can use when they're talking about what we do and why we do it. So our Montessori curriculum, it provides space for children to follow their own unique learning path. They access the learning spaces with open shelves. The curriculum is an integrated thematic approach that ties the separate areas of learning together. The Montessori materials are designed specially and that isolate one concept or skill. and that our enriched curriculum includes interrupted time for children to refine their skills and work to their own time schedule. So we all have the knowledge and all naturally can develop our practice, but sometimes voicing that knowledge confidently can be challenging. So we practice talking about our curriculum when we're in the classroom and talking to each other. And as managers, we endeavour to support our staff in supervisions and staff development so they have the confidence to talk about what we do. Next slide, please. So if we ask ourselves, what is our curriculum? We can maybe more succinctly say it is built on the foundations developed by Maria Montessori, fundamentally that. It is informed by the children. It is informed by interaction with the children and interaction with resources. It provides tools to children to learn and develop. It's responsive to change. It adapts to children's interests, age and stages, and it incorporates other learning programs. So this is another little helpful crib sheet that we use with our staff to help them understand and describe our curriculum. Next slide, please. So this is a lovely quote that I'd like to end this little section with. So in Montessori practice, the foundations of education must be based on the following facts: that the joy of the child is in accomplishing things great for her age, that the real satisfaction of the child is to give maximum effort to the task in hand, that happiness consists in well-directed activity of body and mind in a way of excellence, that strength of mind and body and spirit is acquired by exercise and experience, and that true freedom has as its objective service to society and to mankind consistent with the progress and happiness of the individual. It's a great quote. I'd like to now pass you on to my colleague Rachel, who's going to talk about the 3 I's.
Thank you, Jo. So let's get started. I don't know if you can see me or not. Anyway, right, here we go. So as Barbara wrote this week in her blog on the trials and tribulations of the revised NAPI curriculum, or also known to us as the EYFS, that planning and next steps have been replaced by articulation of intent, implementation and impact. And the next couple of slides describe how we do this. Could I have the next slide, please? So now more than ever, we need to focus on the emotional well-being of our children in the early years, especially during the times of the pandemic. We know that children learn best through their hands, through their work and play, and the new framework makes it clear that the prime areas of learning pave the foundations for future learning. Children need to learn through their own perceived meaningful work, exploration, creativity, and critical thinking. In fact, the Early Years Handbook states on page 30 that the EYFS educational programmes provides the framework that we build our curriculum around to decide what we intend the children to learn and develop. Leaders and practitioners decide on how to implement this, and so the children can make progress in the 7 areas of learning. Leaders and practitioners evaluate the impact of the curriculum by checking what children know and can do. It then proceeds to say that leaders assure themselves that the settings curriculum, which in our case is the Montessori curriculum, their intentions are met and that it's sufficiently challenging for all children. And please may we have the next slide. So intent. As part of the early years curriculum, we may follow a particular educational approach. We are very lucky that our Montessori philosophy enables us to offer a balance of child-initiated and adult-led learning. Using the environment we provide for them, observing and only stepping in when needed, which I can say it can be quite challenging at times, especially for me as an ex-primary school teacher. Our Montessori prepared environment enables us to show how we are helping children make progress across the 7 areas of learning, as our environment is already set up into those areas. We support the children social and emotionally in all we can do, whether it's supporting their independent choices for free movement, inside or out, free choice of their snack, or what activities they choose to do. Ofsted uses the term intent to describe our setting's agreed way of working. It's about the aims of our setting in helping children develop and learn. Next slide, please. So let's move on to implement. What is implementation? Something that's quite hard to say, according to me just now. It's simply about what you do every day to help your children make progress. It's about the resources that you make available, the way you interact with those children, and the opportunities you provide. Ofsted calls this teaching, and for us this is our role as Montessori directress and our prepared environment. We do not teach or see ourselves as the knowledgeable one. We see ourselves as a guide for the child to travel on their own journey of development and learning. And Ofsted itself sets out what it means by teaching in the early years in its framework, and it's worth having a little look at that to just reassure yourself it's not as scary as it sounds. Next slide, please. So let's talk about impact and what that means. Well, impact is how you know what you're doing is making a difference. You can show the impact of what you're doing, knowing the children and what they're doing, and being able to describe to your managers and inspectors how well you know those children, what they like, what the areas they like, and which areas they show less interest in. We can try and show through observations or pictures and photographs of what our children are learning, allowing them to take them on a learning tour, and we put these pictures in our Montessori handbooks. Any difference that an adult makes in their interventions with a child to move on learning, and you can show your sustained shared thinking. It's a mouthful. Next slide, please. So how do we do it? One of the key things, and the message in this slide is to step back and wait and observe. And the flexible and adaptable nature of our Montessori environment supports all children following the individual. However, not everyone's the same. We've got to be aware that some children prefer rough and tumble play. Some others like to play in a solitary way, playing alongside children, or cooperative or fantasy play or other role play. Our role as adults in the setting is caring for these children, and is to understand the key opportunities we can provide for each child that offer invaluable learning opportunities. With children independently exploring the environment, it offers a valuable chance for adults to observe, interpret the activities they're involved in, the way they're working or using those, and how they are playing, whether this is inside or outside. And I think possibly the next quote from Clark and Moss is really useful, probably useful for me reading this tonight to you. It's about slowing down, but slowing down enough to watch how children spend their time is a necessary beginning. It's where everything starts. Next slide, please. So what do we do? As a Montessori teacher, we are trained to observe. We also talk with our teams about the importance of not just observing, but on listening to the 100 of languages of the child, like in the Reggio approach, learning from what we see and what we hear, reflecting on what we see, reflecting on what we hear, and what do we learn from this, and then making the changes that will then support the child. We need to listen, learn, reflect. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, last part of my little bit here, we're looking forward. When we had a staff meeting recently at my setting, we discussed what we needed to do as custodians of the prepared environment and develop the above actions. Okay, this is, I need my glasses, it's quite dark. So basically we need to take time to understand the changes in the new EYFS. We've just been letting that sort of sit with us, not making big changes in our practice yet, finding out where those changes will affect us. Then we need to reflect on practice as a team. We work together as a team to bring out change if it's necessary, and we ensure that everybody in our settings can confidently discuss each child's learning journeys, who they are, and where they're going, and ensuring that everybody knows all of the children in the setting. And that might be a big challenge for some people. They might have a lot of children in their setting, but it is really important that you can tell the inspectors or tell each other something about those children that you are working with. And then we reflect on how to empower the child, how to give them the choice, involve the children in everything we do in the classroom, you know, from learning, caring for each other, caring for the environment, tidying it up, cleaning. And, you know, even though it's really easy to just get that hoover out, just hoover up quickly because it's done quicker, you know, involve the children with that, washing up, hanging out the washing, even tea towels hanging up on an area can be something that they can get involved with and they soon learn from. Okay, well, that's all I'm going to say now, and that's the end of my part, but I'd like to thank you and hand over to Claire.
Hi there, I'm Claire. So I'm just going to talk to you through about the learning walk that we all have to do. So we need to be confident about what we know and talking about what we do. We must not be scared to enrich it, draw on the culture and community around us. Explain about the benefits that Small World offer. There's forest school, role play, loose part play, to further develop the curriculum we offer, but this can be done with Montessori at its heart. We need to learn as Montessori teachers to talk about it, doing these in practice all the time, even when we are doing a show round to prospective parents. This is a great opportunity to really sell what we have and what we do best. With doing this, we can then see our staff grow in confidence. I think that is the next slide I need. If we keep that one there, please, thank you. So this is quite a nice little slide just to look through. So just a little summary. Have a positive approach to your learning walk. Be prepared and well informed. Know your settings vision. Know your philosophy. Know the curriculum and understand the 3 I's, which Rachel has just beautifully explained. Be confident to reflect and talk about change. The learning walk that is generally done with the Ofsted inspector and us as managers is actually an amazing opportunity to talk about Montessori, to talk about how the environment supports learning and what the children are doing, talking about who we are. The overview of the slide gives a framework around which to build your learning walks. As part of the supervision programs that we carry out with all our staff, these learning walks with each other reflect and support each other and develop their knowledge. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is just the last little slide that we can just have a look through. So this is our learning walk. So how do the children learn from the environment? We should use the term implement, intent and impact in all we do. Use your own words. It will come easily if you have an understanding of why you are doing it that way, and talk through everything that you are doing at that time, everything that you have got and have planned, and enjoy showing why we are so great. That is the end of my little slide. So I am going to hand you over to my other colleague, Carly, who is going to talk about observation and paperwork. Thank you for listening.
So hi there. Hi everybody. So I'm going to be talking about the paperwork, or hopefully not as much of it. We've been working really hard to reduce our paperwork, and to do this we had to ask ourselves some questions. Next slide please. So the first change going forward, we needed to think about our evidencing by record keeping. We had to think about how to use our online system, what is required now, why we keep records, do we need to keep on tracking the children, what do they tell us, and how can we reduce the workload. So as a team, we reflected on what we record keep and what we record. So next slide please. So what about the tracking? Where there is no more tracking going forward, we no longer need to track individual children or cohorts. The only written requirements for tracking and assessment are the 2-year-old progress check, from the early years foundation stage profile. So it clearly states in the EYFS 2021 that we do not need to track, tick list, or write everything down. Our role is with the children, and so not in the office on PPA time, but we do need to keep all of our parents really well informed. Next slide, please. So what is required? There is less emphasis on the paperwork now, which is great for everybody, and more emphasis on the staff knowing the children. Your record is the talking narrative. So Ofsted and the DfE have clearly told us to reduce the paperwork, but they also acknowledge through inspection that we need to know all of our children, as Claire was just saying like earlier about that. So although there is less emphasis on paperwork, there is still emphasis on key workers being able to talk about all of the children. So this is what we know that we need to develop alongside the learning walks to develop all of our knowledge. We encourage all of the key workers to talk to each other all the time about the children, about what they're doing, what they're achieving from their environment, what the impact is of their learning, which will naturally increase everybody's confidence to talk about all of the children in the setting. So now our minds are our filing cabinet. But we still asked ourselves, should we be documenting anything? So next slide, please. So documenting the learning, should it be paper or online? There is no right or wrong. Next slide, please. So when we record the observations, we always use a picture as it's worth 1,000 words. We write down what the picture does not show. We're always honest and we try and keep it simple, and we describe the journey that the children are actually doing and going through. Recorded observations on the online system are to keep the parents in the picture. That's why we do them, to develop learning stories about the children and with the children in order to develop the parent partnership and to increase parents' knowledge. So next slide, please. Okay. So the observations, what we do is we do a narrative every fortnight. We build a story of the child's nursery journey, and we link it to the characteristics of effective learning and the Montessori curriculum. Next slide, please. Okay, so the ongoing learning story. So we create a learning story, which are photos over the 2 weeks of the children doing a variety of activities. In your observation, you can pinpoint a special moment or something the child was particularly interested in at that time, or something they've done really, really well over those 2 weeks. When using a Montessori activity as your title, it automatically links the child's progress in this activity to the framework, Montessori framework. And we always mark whatever we've been doing as emerging, developing or secure, so we know how well that child is doing at that time with that particular activity they're doing. The observations made throughout the term are to tell a story to the parent, not to map to a curriculum with lots and lots of tick lists. Next slide, please. So ongoing, formative, emerging, developing, secure, spotlight judgments. So what we do the key worker formative judgment on our online system, where we are formatively informing our knowledge of the child and making judgments all the time. We work really hard to communicate this to each other as a team, and to parents and to carers. And we do all of this in our heads all the time, but now we need to be able to talk about it. And this is what we practice with our teams all the time. So we do, we have the ongoing key worker professional formative judgment. We have a starting point where the child starts, and we do this with the parent. And then an overview of the key child, whether they are emerging, developing and secure from any observational knowledge every time we do them. And then we can spotlight the children who are working below or above at these times. Next slide, please. So for our starting points, I've already touched on that a little bit. We currently use the Development Matters framework with our parents, and we mark off the starting points, and then your future observations will add to this document to help to clearly see where the child sits in that framework, to help them to help you to make a professional judgment on the child at that point in time. Next slide, please. Okay, so an overview. So the differentiation between formative and summative. We talked a lot about the difference between formative and summative assessments, and this has helped us to reduce our paperwork. It still helped us to feel confident that we know the children and that we can talk about their achievements and their developmental journeys. So the formative aspects of it are the fortnightly observation, the parents' contribution to it, children's Montessori journey, the key workers' verbal knowledge of the child, and the community scrapbook, which we're going to talk about a little bit more shortly. And then the summative is the 2-year check, which is carried out at nursery. And then you have the transition to school or to another nursery. And then the early years foundation stage profile, which is carried out in reception year. Next slide, please. And then I will be passing over to my colleague, Jo, again, who was going to talk you through the Montessori journey book.
Hi, back to me. Okay, hi, I'd like to talk a little bit about our Montessori learning books. These are books that we give out to our children when they first start at the nursery. There's lots of information in there for parents maybe to fill in about the child, the likes and the dislikes, that kind of thing. And then very much the book is intended for the child to really take ownership of it. So it's kept at school in a very sort of low sort of shelf that they can access at any time, so they can share with their friends. They can decide if they want to put a picture in it, something they've created, or maybe they've taken a photo, we can print it out and put it in there. So we very much want the children to take ownership of their book and to share with their parents. We also put things in the book such as narrative observations and maybe tracking observations of where the children, sort of time sampling observation where the children have worked in the classroom. And previously our narrative observations were sort of a written account of what the child was doing, and in the last sort of year or so we've gone more towards the learning story kind of narrative obs, where the pictures tell the story, and we found that the children really enjoy sharing those with each other, because we realized that 10 pictures of a child doing an activity, maybe with a group of other children, so they can then retell that story to their friends from the pictures. So that's how we've used it. So that's that's our learning journeys. Can I have the next slide, please, Gwendolyn? One of our other nurseries have created a Montessori community sort of learning journey, really, and that's kept in their cultural area. And rather than having the individual books for each child, they have this one community scrapbook then that charts the daily life of the nursery, plus the special times that they may experience as well. And this has really helped. This is actually quite a new nursery, and it's really helped the children to really have a sense of belonging. Maybe, their parents as well, they can share it with their parents when they come in to collect them. So I think that's a really lovely thing, and it's something that we're quite keen in our nursery to include as well, and have it in the cultural area. And so we have lots of pictures, and we have lots of siblings that come to our nursery, and the thought that the child that comes today and they have their Christmas lunch and the various different things that happen throughout the year, and then maybe the following year the younger sibling comes and they can see it as well. But it's almost that family storybook, isn't it, that we can create. So I'm really quite keen to do that for ourselves as well. Could I have the next slide, please, Gwendolyn? So just to sum up, our Montessori journey books really give children a voice. They can document their own learning and development. They also help us acknowledge children's right to be the primary authors of their life. This is something that they can control. So unlike the online record-keeping system, which their parents have and their parents can show them on their phone or their tablet, which is lovely, but the book is something they can tangibly hold, and they can put it in their bag to take home, or they can take it out of the bookcase to share with their friends at school. So I think it's a really important part. And likewise, the Montessori community book, the scrapbook, that means that they can share it. Again, that's something they can own. So when done really well, they provide children, families and key workers the opportunity to see themselves through the thoughts and ideas of others. And final slide, please, Gwendolyn. So finally, one last quote that we're going to end on. And we always feel this quote brings together how statutory commitments and community can come together in our philosophy. So this is education, understood as a help to life, an education from birth, which feeds a peaceful revolution and unites all in a common aim, attracting them to a single centre. Mother, father, politicians, all must combine in their respect and help for this delicate work of formation, which the little child carried on in the depth of profound psychological mystery under the tutelage of an inner guide. This is a bright new hope for mankind, so said Montessori. Lovely. That's the end of our presentation. We thank you for your time. We hope you found it interesting, and we'll hand back to Gwendolyn and Barbara.
Thank you so very much. This is such a rich resource. You have covered so many things, but for me, the most important message from what you have done is this idea of celebrating the child's voice. And I love the idea of the community scrapbook, which charts the progress of what is happening in the nursery, supporting the children's sense of belonging, which is so important, particularly to the children who have joined us recently, who have experienced quite significant isolation during the pandemic, and who need to begin to feel being part of something bigger than just their family. After all, nursery education is about the social embryonic stage, about the capacity to be part of a bigger whole, about learning to manage with other people. And you have captured it really beautifully. But I very much appreciate everything you have put into your PowerPoint. There are so many useful tools and hints for practitioners to use. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise. It has been a very rich presentation, but we would like to also invite you to perhaps ask one or two questions. We have got lots of people participating, so the best way to do that would be to put your questions into the chat, please, or to begin with, perhaps put up your hand if you have got a pressing question you want to ask immediately and you cannot wait to be caught in the chat string of questions. Is anybody brave enough to ask a question very quickly? Wow. I think we are all overwhelmed by the volume of your experience that you have shared with all of us. I think that it's quite incredible how many elements you have included in the presentation and how well you have drawn not only on the characteristics of effective learning, instead of looking at the tracking of the children's progress, how well you have looked at the importance of your observation and the documentation of the observation in terms of the New Zealand Te Whāriki model of learning stories. For those of you who are new to our community, we have covered many of these elements in individual webinars that you may want to track back through our recordings that are available on our website. So don't feel too overwhelmed. Just go to our resources and see what you can draw from what we have shared with you tonight. Gwendolyn, have we got some? Oh, Sarah Johnson is ready to ask. She's waving. I can see her. Hooray. Come on, Sarah.
Okay.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, that's it. I was really wondering what platform, what online platform you use. We use My Montessori Child, and I think they're brilliant ideas and I really want to go with them, but I'm wondering how much time is taken up producing the children's, when you've got a lot of children there, individual. The community one sounds more able to do as a group, which would be not take long, but those individual personal journeys, how does that work? How do you cross over from the online platform? That'll do. Thank you.
Shall I take this one?
Please.
Hi. We very much empower the children to take control of that. So it's not something that we're filling in every week or every month ourselves. So if a child completes a piece of work, maybe the question is, oh, do you want to take that home? Do you want to put it in your book? What would you like to do with it? So to keep asking those questions of them. So we are trying to empower the child. It's not something that we then feel encumbered, having to fill something in, you know, sort of every week or something. No.
If you've got a child who wanted to take, you know, I want to take it all home, and you've got nothing to put in their individual book, do you feel obliged then though to, oh, you better put a picture in because you won't have anything in her book?
No,
I mean,
because the books only go home when the child chooses to take it home.
Okay, so
yeah,
if Ofsted came and said, well, why has that child got lots and that child hasn't got lots, you would say, well, that's because that's what the child wants.
It's a child-led thing.
Completely child-led. That's lovely.
Yeah, we're not.
Sorry, no, I was just wondering with the online, do you still do online? I mean, we use My Montessori Child, and we might put out 2 or 3 observations a week for the children and a parent note.
So we have, this is the change for us since the new framework came in, that we've changed, moved, and it is a work in practice. We're very much trialing something and seeing how it works. So we've moved from doing the 2 or 3 observations a week to doing this one longer narrative form of observation, one a fortnight. So it's a challenge to the practitioners. So far, parents haven't come back, interestingly enough, with very many comments. 1 or 2 have come back and said, oh, you know, we're hearing things all the time now we're not so much. But what we're trying to give them is that much more holistic view of what their child is doing at nursery then. So over 2 weeks then, we might take lots of pictures over those 2 weeks. And then when that observation is written up, you're making a much more broader judgment on how that child has been. So one example I was thinking of that practitioner looked at, oh, that child's definitely moving into the more social phase of things. I've realised now that, oh, they did that pink towel, but then they did so-and-so. But actually they always did it with somebody else. Actually, it was a social aspect that really started coming through more. So maybe you'd write from that perspective. This child's becoming much more social. They're much more governed by what the little group of friends are doing. They're deciding together. Maybe it's role play, maybe it's these activities, but it's alongside somebody else. So it's quite a different style, really, which I feel is making us reflect more about the child and how they're learning. And it's bringing in those characteristics of effective learning, whether they're really engaged, You know, are they really exploring? Remember, they're really more active learning now. So it's that, but it's a work in progress. We don't feel like we've kind of got it all sorted. Yeah, we're just
but it's really interesting because almost the observations in my Montessori do come a little bit tick boxy as well, and you think, how much are we showing a picture and a little bit as it we don't want to do? So that is a really, I'd be interested to explore it. So thank you. That's really useful.
You're welcome.
Really useful. Thank you.
So, Joe, from what you have said, I take it that you are looking at much more developmental perspective of the child rather than focusing on the materials. And I think that that is really, really important, because working with individual materials may not mean so much to the parents, but in fact, when you put it in the context of how that piece of material contributes to their whole development, really is giving parents a much richer picture of their experience in the nursery. Do I understand it right?
Yes, and I think, and that's why I feel like that's why we've gone that way. It is more meaningful to the parent. Yeah, it's explaining what is going on, what learning is happening, and why is that valuable? What's the purpose of that? Yeah,
that's lovely. Thank you. Are there any more questions from the audience, or any more comments?
Two in the chat, Barbara. The first is the fact that printing the photographs is great, but it's also quite expensive. Has anyone, not just you lovely people who have spoken to us this evening, lovely ladies, but has anyone got any suggestions for keeping the printing of photographs down to a reasonable cost?
Maybe you want to reflect on it and
reflect and pop something in the chat.
Yes, or share it with us as a follow-up in an email, and then we can share it if you have got some really, really good
snazzy tool
tip. Yeah.
And then the other question is, there are settings that track the presentation of materials. Are you still doing that as a team, or is the communication that you have as a team in team meetings, is that replacing the material presentation tracking system? Did you ever?
Hi, shall I answer that one? We're still tracking the Montessori framework, and obviously when you do an activity, if you present the pink tower, for example, that will then track when you record it on our online platform. But what we will then do is look at those areas regularly and tick them off. So if you look in the first area and you see that a child, they're confidently doing the button frame or the zipping frame, they can zip their own coat up, we would just tick that off, and we wouldn't wait to see that, because you might not see that, but you will have knowledge of them. So we're still marking off the Montessori framework within our online platform, and we're doing it sort of, so that's when I know we don't have PPA as much or as long as maybe we every week, but maybe once a fortnight you might just grab the iPad and just go on, just check one of your key children, have a look through. It might be that something they've done that particular day might alert you to the fact that actually, they didn't roll the mat today. They just sort of scrunched up in a ball. Do they know how to roll up a mat? Let's have a look and let's go through that section of the Montessori framework.
Good tip. Thank you, Rachel. So we also, in your comment, you have reminded us of the fact that the children don't necessarily follow the pattern of activities as they are presented on the shelf, that they respond to the shelves in their own spontaneous way. And it is important for us as professionals to use our judgment to see how how the children build their knowledge up. So, they will be using skills in a more advanced activity, even though they may not have done some of the earlier activities. Does that make sense? Good, thank you. There have been some really good suggestions on how to make the pictures cheaper, black and white, doing a collage of several pictures. Thank you very much for contributing to this discussion. Any more questions?
Doesn't look like there are. There was the question which I've answered just briefly, but there is the question whether there was going to be another guide to a Montessori guide for the EYFS, and
Okay.
perhaps you would like to say a little bit more about that.
Yes, thank you very much. That's kind of leading us to the closing part of today's presentation. I think that yes, we have promised you a guide in the beginning of the autumn term. It has been slow in progress, but we are ready to share something with you. It is very different to the initial guide to the EYFS, simply because we trust that most of you actually already know the EYFS. Most of you know the progressions towards the early learning goals. So what we have tried to do, we have tried to draw together what the development matters say. We have looked at also at what Burst to 5 says, because we value the professional expertise which is reflected in the Burst to 5. And then we give suggestions of what might happen in those educational programs or in the areas of learning within the Montessori environment, which could act as a prompt for you when you describe your Montessori early years curriculum. We also remind you of the early learning goals that the child is working towards in their progression whilst using Montessori materials and other activities which your nursery has to offer. We just want to remind you that it is really in the reception class that people begin to test or begin to work more actively towards meeting the early learning goals. For us as Montessorians working primarily with children from 2 to 4 in the UK, we are really looking at the indirect preparation in the things that you do every single day to help children develop their motor skills, to develop their communication skills, in being able to socialize with others. Those are the important things that form the foundation, which will enable them to shine when they go and when they leave you at the age of 4 and when they go to reception class. We have prepared the guide with the idea that perhaps it will be only available electronically. We are not producing a paper version because it is not within the scope of our financial background. We have served the community for the last year totally free of charge. We are committed to continuing to serve the community free of charge, but we would also ask you to make a contribution to the international vision of what Montessori has to offer. So if you would like the guide, we really ask you to please make a contribution to Sparkle Foundation, which operates in Malawi and provides not only education, but also health services and also food and also community support for the children who benefit from Montessori education offered by the Sparkle Foundation. If you could please donate as little as you can. Our target is £1,000, but we hope that the Montessori community is rich enough to contribute because it will be well used by the community in Malawi, by the children who really need our support. We need to always remember that Montessori is an international movement and that not all the children in the world benefit from the things that our world or our community in the UK can provide them with, or their parents and your schools can offer them. So please give generously, and we hope that you will find the guide helpful. Please send us your comments on the guide. We would like to know how well you can use it or how useful it can be to you for in the future. And perhaps we can have another session on the guide as we progress through you using it and as we get feedback from all of you. I just wonder if at the end of today's session, Wendy Compson would like to say 1 or 2 words about her experience of a Ofsted inspection, which took place at Colorbox Nursery in Suffolk.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Barbara. We had our inspection last Tuesday, and it was a really interesting experience. I work for the 5 nurseries as a mentor and trainer. So I didn't think perhaps the inspector would actually be very interested in me, but actually she was. And I've been swatting up about the 3 I's, and her questioning, I could actually work it all out as the questions came. Ah, yes, that's that one, that's that one, that's that one. But she was so interested in Montessori, and it was just really uplifting sometimes just to listen to her talking about Montessori and all her observations. We felt absolutely wrung out at the end, but the learning walk is so, so important, because that's our chance to say, this is what Montessori is all about. This is what we're doing. This is what our children are doing. And I think that's probably the most valuable thing of the new framework. I think it's really good that the managers have the opportunity, or the owners, to walk around with the inspector and show off what we do. We do such a good job, and so often we don't sing enough about what we do. So we don't know what the result is, but we will wait and see. But it wasn't the most daunting experience I thought it might be. So good luck, everybody. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And thank you, Carly. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Rachel. It was so generous of you to spend the time at the beginning of the term after Christmas to share your expertise and your ideas. We will share the PowerPoint with everybody with the recording tomorrow, because I think there is tons of stuff that you can go back to and use for your staff development in your setting. Thank you very, very much. And good luck, everybody. Enjoy this opportunity to show off what Montessori has to offer to children. Thank you.